Meeting to order of the Public Safety Committee for Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. Introduction of late items, Ms. Bakar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No late items to be introduced today.
Thank you. Can I please have a motion for the adoption of the agenda? Moved by Ruth, seconded by Hillary. Any comments or concerns? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Now, movement for the adoption of the minutes. Moved by Councillor Eastimer, seconded by Scott. Any errors or omissions or comments? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, carries. First on our list is council communications. Is that introduced by you, Ms. Bakar, or?
Sure, Madam Chair, I can briefly advise the committee that for the first item, the Nanaimo Restorative Justice Program Overview, Council at its meeting on January 20th did adopt the committee's recommendation to continue to advocate to the provincial government for funding for the Nanaimo Restorative Justice Program. And the second item, 5B, regarding Newcastle Community Association, just an update for the committee that the committee's recommendation to Council to invite representatives of the Newcastle Community Association to attend the Public Safety Committee meeting to share their concerns regarding impact of homelessness on residents and other businesses was deferred for consideration at the future council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentations. Our first presentations today will be done, it's on Save Our Streets, Communities Driving Change Forum from Highlights and Overview. This will be introduced by Mr. LeBerge, our Director of Public Safety.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. The Save Our Streets Community Driving Change Forum took place in Vancouver on January 23rd. This was a moderated forum that included topics, judicial reform and police reform, addictions and mental illness continuum of care, and the role of housing. The forum was attended by representatives from the Judiciary, Prosecution Service, police addiction specialists, housing advocates, and academics. And our own Mayor Krogh was a speaker on one of the panels. By all accounts, the forum was excellent, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to invite some of the folks that organized the forum to talk about their experience and see if there are any gaps or opportunities in our local community safety initiatives that may be of assistance. So today we have Ms. Karen Kowicka, who's one of the organizers and part of the Newcastle Neighborhood Association. And online we're also joined by Mr. Jess Ketchum, who's the co-founder of the SOS Coalition. And they'll give an overview of the topics that were discussed in January. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Kowicka.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask that we hold questions till the end of the presentation. And as always, please put up your hand. I'll write it down and call you in order. Thank you, Ms. Kowicka. And Mr. Ketchum, appreciate you attending.
Thank you. As Dave said, my name is Karen Kowicka, and I am with the Newcastle Community Association. And the co-founder of SOS is with us today, Jess Ketchum, and he's going to introduce how the SOS started.
Well, thanks very much, Karen, and thanks everyone for inviting us and providing us with this opportunity to talk to you. I'm very familiar with the situation in Nanaimo because of all the good work done by, I want to call out Paul Middleton and Kevin Shaw from NAPSA and Karen with Newcastle. They've done extraordinary work in raising these issues publicly, and that's been, I think, has really given life to our organization as well. SOS is a nonprofit society. We're volunteer driven. I'm a volunteer. Our board of directors, Clint Malman from London Drugs, Jeff Bray, who you may know is a former MLA, Victoria MLA, and president of Downtown Victoria, Linda Annis, who is the executive director of Crime Stoppers, and myself. That's the board, but we also established an oversight committee to provide us with guidance and input. Karen sits on that board initially as representing NAPSA and now Newcastle. And along with community reps from Prince George, Nelson, and business reps, some you would be familiar with, Bridget Anderson from the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, Ian Tossinson from the Restaurant Association, and Jamie Nelson, who's the incoming president of the Pattison Food Group. So why did we come together? Well, we are all way too familiar with the degree of crime, violence, and public disorder that we're seeing on our streets. And I often say that it's not just the downtown Vancouver, the downtown east side, but of course, you people well know it in Nanaimo and the situation there. Well, that's replicated in so many communities around the province, to varying degrees, of course, but in every community around the province, they're running into these issues. So there have been a lot of well-meaning people who have been working on this for a long time, but failing to make any real headway. There's lots of finger pointing between different levels of government and offloading to, we had a meeting this morning with your mayor and his CAO, and I mentioned that there's been a lot of offloading by senior government to municipalities, and they certainly agree with that. However, local communities don't have the resources or the means to solve these problems, and neither do individual businesses or business associations. So we believe that there are solutions to these issues, but there hasn't been the political will to really implement those solutions because they're not high enough up the priority level of government too often. Of course, governments today are inundated with requests for spending of money, and that ladder for priorities is pretty important. So we believe that a big part of our role in coming together has been to help move those issues up the priority ladder of government, and we know that we're basing that on the shoulders of groups like NAPSA and others, and we think that in the most recent provincial election cycle, that was certainly evident. And today it is and was a top of mind issue during the election. And we would like to think that was going to be the same going into the federal election, though the waters are changing there pretty rapidly as far as issues for the federal election are concerned. So we provide a coalition of community interests that include community groups and businesses. And today, I'm proud to say that I think we're probably the largest coalition of its type ever formed in BC, because we've stuck to our guns. We're nonpartisan. We're community and business. We're province-wide, and we do have membership in every region of the province, extensive membership now, and we've avoided getting bogged down into debates on localized issues, whether it be the location of a housing project or location of a something dealing with safer supply. So we haven't got bogged down in those issues, and I think that's been important. We've also been very fact-based and data-based. We've done our own research, public opinion research through Research Co., and along with our partners as well, additional research through the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and the Business Council of BC. We know we're making an impact. We're having some degree of an impact because we immediately after the election, we received a call from the Premier's office wanting to meet, and we did. We met with the Premier and Minister Malcolmson, who you folks know well, a couple of other ministers, Young and Begg, and I've had a number of meetings with Minister Young since then. So we have their attention. That provides us with an opportunity, and we're certainly trying to take advantage of that opportunity while it exists. We then decided that we wanted to conduct this forum to really raise the profile and credibility of SOS. And as was said, it was very successful. I'm extremely pleased with the way that it went. We had an extraordinary list of participants. When you have a discussion on policing in British Columbia, and when you have the commanding officer of the RCMP, the chief of police for Vancouver, the chief of police of the new Surrey force, and Kash Heed, the former Attorney General or Solicitor General, you can't get any better than that. We had a great conversation. So it was extraordinary. Minister Young spoke, as did John Rustad. Premier Eby was invited, of course, but had a conflict. But we were very pleased with Minister Young being there, who also spent the entire day. We had a couple of other speakers, Marshall Smith, whom you may know of, recently retired as the Chief of Staff of the Premier of Alberta, and he, a former British Columbian, has driven a lot of the programming for addictions and mental health in Alberta. And Marshall spoke about what he sees as their progress. And we had Mayor Sim, who initially was just going to provide a welcome to Vancouver, but decided they wanted to make an announcement, and made a pretty significant announcement that we can also discuss as well, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. We had a waiting list of 40 people wanting to get into the Wash Center for Dialogue, and we had several hundred people from around the province who live streamed the event as well. So that's sort of a high-level overview, and I know that Karen was going to talk about the panels. Karen?
Thanks, Jess. There was three main themes that emerged from the forum. One was prevention. It went across all of the four panels. This being the first one, justice. Also, an agreement about some form of secure involuntary care in appropriate cases, and also community consultation, a great receptiveness to community consultation from all of the panels. The first panel was Justice for All, Challenges and Choices, and the first topic that came up was prevention, the new generation at risk, getting to the root causes that lead to criminality in the first place, and preventing interactions downstream with the criminal justice system. The prevalence of the intersection of justice and health, and how they must work together and create a drive together for essential change. There needs to be a marriage between health and justice, and absolutely no line between them. The vast majority of people in the criminal justice system have mental health and addiction issues, and that's long been understood. The topic of bail, the laws are there to protect people from being in custody and being wrongfully convicted or detained, unless the primary reason being they will not appear, or two, they have a substantial likelihood to reoffend, or a third, a tertiary reason being the confidence of the public in the criminal justice system. One program that has been highly effective is the REVOI program, and Nanaimo is part of that. The current targets identified in REVOI have an 80% detainment rate with limited criteria. Our Crown Counsel Association President, Dalrymple, he was shocked that more offenders are not caught in the Revoy program because it allows prosecutors the time that they really need and the resources to prepare quality and compelling submissions for judges at bail hearings, which isn't happening normally in normal situations. The Crown, the frontline prosecutors are just triaging cases. They're running what they call skinny bail hearings just to get through the list because the list doesn't end. There's no in-depth background considered when they're just plowing through the list on a daily basis. Also, there was discussion about a national bail system. Currently, there is a system called Justin, and it's outdated. It does not provide information from other jurisdictions, and people are transient, moving from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and they're evading the conditions of their bail. They're avoiding outstanding warrants, and having a national system would help prevent that, which is causing delays, and of course, that's a preventable delay. The Crown Council of Prosecutors, Crown Council Association of Prosecutors, want to have community prosecution, where the prosecutor must know the community when they conduct charge assessments. They must have the context of the community. They need a local perspective, and they want to play a role in restoring faith and credibility to the public in the criminal justice system, and connect public expectations with courtroom realities. And there's a general agreement that justice must hear the people. Police, Crown, and judges seem to operate in silos, although they're all in the same system. There's no focus on prevention, and there's no front-end prevention. One example that has been effective in the past was the Downtown Community Court. There's a collateral information screen available during the court proceedings. There's generally a case manager, a mental health worker, there's a chronic offender program, but currently judges learn no interventions on the accused mental health or addictions needs. Health and social issues are plaguing the criminal justice system. It's failing due to substantial increases in mental health and addictions and brain injuries making its way into the criminal justice system. We need ways for the health system and the justice system to collaborate in upstream intervention points, a requirement for secure involuntary care for people who are in danger to themselves or to others. And there was general agreement on secure involuntary care, especially care that takes place close to home for people to maintain their connection to community and family. There was a lot of information on the BC First Nations 15 justice centers across the province. They've developed a 25-point strategy put together by 204 First Nations. And their focus is on diversion away from the criminal justice system, especially for petty and survival crimes, where the criminal justice system or incarceration will not serve the issues or solve the issues of the offender. They have a community court that has community members, and it's not criminal-centric, and it's an excellent deterrent. For offenders, it is more difficult to face their community than it is to face incarceration. Collateral information screening is available with facts on hospital stays, health, family, housing, and the justice centers and Indigenous First Nations Court have legal representation available, but along with resource workers with wraparound services, health referrals, housing services, nursing. The concept is well people equals safer communities, healthier people, there's less recidivism, good template for a wider community example and for criminal justice system reform in general. So to summarize, prevention, education, outreach, youth, family interventions, and prevent interactions with criminal justice. Justice is tied to wellness. They're not separate, they're the same. Find ways to divert people away from criminal justice when their crimes are petty and they have unmet medical needs. The vast majority of people in the criminal justice system have mental health and addictions issues. National bail deposition system, ensure offenders from other jurisdictions are accountable in BC on conditions and warrants. Secure involuntary care, ensuring that people who can't function are stabilized in care. And community consultation, local informed prosecutor that understands the community and community court with community members. The second panel is options and opportunities in changing time, police and public safety. So the National Police Federation president was there, and his ask was for a national broadband network collaboration for sharing information between police forces nationwide in real time. Currently, police forces are changing for the current times. They're very adaptive. They're often the last resort safety net, especially in rural communities. Officers need diverse training. They wear many hats and they're overburdened, adapting to an ever-changing service delivery model. It's well known that violent offenders have adverse child experiences, so investing in youth for prevention and investing in upstream solutions is, again, something that the police want to see. Perception and public trust matters. Many more officers are needed in BC. There isn't a recruitment problem, but instead there are no academy seats. There's no funding for the seats, and that was the number one ask. You may know that the RCMP train at Depot in Winnipeg, but all Regina, excuse me. All other police forces train at the Justice Institute, and there was a big ask for funding. For instance, the Surrey Police Department needs 300 officers, and every seat that the police forces are allotted, they fill. And there's many more people waiting to fill any new seats that would come available. There's also was the question, what do we want our officers to do? We have so many more officers needed, and we need to increase the ratio of officers per 100,000 in population, which then equals more seats needed at the Justice Institute of BC. There was encouraging results from efforts in high visibility policing. It results in more drugs and weapons seizures and reduction of crime, and reviewing policing models, finding new ways of doing business and providing protective services, including proactive policing, but it all equals more officers. The second request was the need for secure involuntary care, a continuum of care. In most cases that involve a requirement for some form of intervention or care are administered in the provincial courts. Also, a requirement from government to stop the problems upstream before people have interactions with the police. People in a state of victimization are prone to interactions due to mental health and addictions. A third request, do not release on bail. I think that's a pretty common sentiment lately. Judges need to inform the Bail Reform Act. There's investigative resources needed. Criminals are more and more complex, and the police play by the rules. Criminals don't. For instance, the police are required to provide an affidavit before a judge in order to get a warrant, and that takes resources. Integrated teams with good interagency cooperation is crucial to advance the current complexities of policing. And all levels of government need to own their part of the problem. There's lots of drugs produced here. There's chemical components are being imported, and legislation is needed to import the raw, or to control the importation of the raw materials used. So summarizing, funding needed for seats at the Justice Institute is not a recruitment problem, it's a seat problem. Interest is at an all-time high. Need more officers in BC for proactive policing and high visibility and to increase the ratio. Do not release on bail, secure involuntary care, all levels of government owning their part of the problem, and legislation needed. Panel 3 is addictions and mental health, the prescription for continuum of care. It was said that society prepares the crime and the criminal takes it. Society contributes with poverty, not a feeling of not belonging, access to drugs, illness, violence, and all of those lead to psychosis. There's a huge increase in psychosis directly correlated to the increase in cannabis use. 40% of meth users now have psychosis, 9 to 12% have mild to mid psychosis. And meth is being made, it used to be made, from amphetamines that are non-toxic and D, amphetamines that are toxic. And now A is a controlled substance, so the makers are using D to make meth, which has made it highly toxic, and it's had a spillover effect in mental health and addiction care. Due to the high toxicity, it causes sleep deprivation, and it promotes psychosis. And users, because they're in psychosis, have fewer system interruptions in their use, which used to prolong their ability to maintain their use, and no longer are they able to do that. Prolonged use also severely damages a person's dopamine receptors, and all of that contributes to a higher probability of psychosis, which is, what we're all seeing. It also then results in a protracted withdrawal, which is new. Acute withdrawal is 7 to 10 days. Post-acute withdrawal, 3, 6, or even 12 months. And it takes at least 24 months for someone to recover and restore their dopamine receptor function. And if you understand what dopamine receptors do, they allow you to feel something. They allow you to feel joy, to be happy. And if you can't feel those things, recovery is insurmountable. Medical practitioners feel that it's not their job to help users use safely. 50% of overdose deaths have mental illness. We need more recovery-oriented specialists versus generalists in mental health and addictions. Now, this is pretty staggering. There's only 32 addiction psychiatrists in BC, and there's well over 100,000 people in BC with opioid use disorder. That's pretty alarming math. Addictions are subspecialties from other areas of medicine, and it should become a mandated part of basic medicine and psychiatric training so that we have more addiction specialists. It's a chronic illness. You might go to the doctor and have your blood pressure monitored because you have a chronic disease like heart disease, but addiction isn't treated in the same way with our healthcare professionals. Medicine and psychiatric training is needed around understanding of addiction, and it should be a mandated part of basic medical training. Addiction, I said that already, excuse me. 45% of downtown East Side residents have neurological issues which are diagnosable on imaging. There's not enough doctors to manage addiction care, so patients needs community support for recovery and care. That's one way that we can expand care for patients. Early and front-end intervention points for youth in schools with family, need the community interventions to prevent the cycle from continuing. We need these intervention points to try and stop it from advancing. Identifying intervention points such as school, police, corrections. In Iceland, they have community interventions like activity vouchers for families. There's always things for people to do. There's nutrition programs, after school play programs, and K-12 prevention and education programs. They also supplement employers to hire people in recovery. They provide purpose with ongoing goals and objectives for a person in recovery. And police can also act as an intervention point when arrested. Police in Alberta have been given the tools to provide opioid substitution therapy, Carside, so that people can have their need addressed immediately. There's a need for leadership and focus on the continuum of ongoing care, so we have objective measurements and maintain data. There is a great need for data and to weigh the data and science with the values of goals of the community. A need an ongoing data to prove the needs and act now. Don't wait for the data, just act on the information you have now and accumulate the data later. The need for dry housing as an off-ramp for corrections and for recovery programs within corrections and longer sentences so people can complete their recovery. 50% or 40% of fatal overdoses have been happening in corrections, and there needs to be accountability. Consequences must outweigh the benefits of continuing substance use. So to summarize, we need more addiction specialists and psychiatrists and mandated training. We need to prioritize prevention in every intervention point, effective intervention points for people with chronic illnesses, prevent mental, physical, and social behavioral decline. More treatment beds, readily accessible, affordable treatment, and treatment in corrections. Collect and track data so that we can weigh that data against the outcomes and goals of community, and continuity of objectives. And the final panel is a role of housing in combating crime, violence, and public disorder. One of the main topics that was themed throughout all of the other points was to move away from concentrating congregate housing. 84% of downtown East Side residents said they wanted to live away from the downtown East Side and not in concentrations. There's a Swiss model was studied, and they recommend one person per house. Let me get this right. One person with addiction per building. So that translates to their nonprofit has 80 suites in 80 buildings, and they place people in those buildings. And the reason for that is a healthy community leads to healthy individuals. And the people in those communities can then support that one individual to maintain a healthy lifestyle. When people are surrounded by chaos and they live in chaos, they do not thrive. They perpetuate more chaos, which puts them in danger and at risk. Concentration creates changes in social norms, and it breeds risk, victimization, and violence. Prevention of homelessness. You may be familiar with the PIT count, the point-in-time count, and it reveals that chronic homelessness starts very young. And programs in schools to catch and prevent problems upstream are critical. Early access to services with families when there are intervention points, often with schools and with health services. We need more housing than we have. The need is greater than the housing there is. We require diverse housing, specialized housing for youth and seniors, women and children fleeing violence, and individualized housing with rent supplements, congregate housing, and supportive housing for appropriate candidates. Supportive housing is fueled by homelessness. It's the priority in receiving that housing. Applications go to community assessment for a best fit and placement, which is always the goal. But due to the fact that people are often homeless and in crisis, it's not always possible to meet the best fit, which is, we've seen many examples of that here in Nanaimo. Services with health partners are critical because when people are in supportive housing, they need access to nonprofits, to social workers, to replacing their ID. It's impossible for a person experiencing homelessness or in crisis, in mental health and addiction, to be able to navigate all of those services that are in silos. It's very overwhelming, and that's why it's very critical that they are part of the supportive housing model. Obstacles to building new congregate housing. That is currently, BC Housing's mandate, and it is going on in communities across BC, and what they're facing is the need for education and intentional consultation with community, successful examples which will prevent concerns about new congregate housing. There's obstacles with zoning and bylaw limits, preventing placement opportunities. And central planning prevents the market from building more freely. Housing supply. New legislation promoting densification can have strain on municipal infrastructure. BC Housing partnering with developers to build mixed housing. There's an extreme crisis demand for housing, and the cost of housing creates poverty factors, which then contribute to the revolving cycle. There's a qualitative measurements, PIR, which is a price-income ratio. Ideally, it should be no more than 4%, and here it sits at 18, 19, 20%. Which isn't sustainable. Municipal governments separate, the recommendation was that municipal governments separate legislation from judicial authority, and it basically takes approval out of the municipal authority, which will produce more housing supply through the market development. That's a lot of information. And I'm sure Jess would probably have some closing comments to offer you.
Actually, we don't have time.
Okay.
Because you've done 30 minutes, you're supposed to be
Oh,
10, but that's
okay.
okay.
All right.
So I'm just going to open it up for questions from the committee. Do we have, Jennifer?
This is more of a meta question, but.
Use your mic.
Can you put on your mic? Yeah.
All of the things that you were talking about, they're so, they generate such strong feelings in people, and it's, I think we've been pretty good at this committee, but even from time to time, it's gotten pretty hot, and sometimes people are so committed to a particular position that it's virtually impossible to have the dialogue and move it forward anymore. So in the work that you guys have been doing, how have you been approaching just having the conversations? And how have you been able to keep it moving?
Karen or Jess?
Well, Jess has had a lot of those high-level conversations, so he can probably speak to that. But in reference to the information I shared with you, these were comments directly from people on the panels having those conversations.
Yeah, but I can take that one step further, Karen, and answer that question. I mean, I mentioned that we avoided getting involved in debates over individual localized issues like the location of housing, supportive housing, and that sort of thing. We've been careful to do that. We've tried to talk about the policy at the policy level. So what policies do we need, whether they're municipal, provincial, or federal, that will address those issues rather than getting into the individual debate as to where that particular service or facility goes. So that's one of the ways that we've avoided that. But we certainly have gotten involved in lots of those discussions. We just try to keep the heat out of it. And you got to be respectful of other people's positions.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Judge?
Is there anything in the
always do
school
that.
programs that shows students and young people what meth addiction really looks like? As opposed to, you know, just the DARE program stuff about this is what a package of cocaine looks like?
Well,
Yeah, that's above my pay grade, but I'll tell you this, that there's a dearth of discussion about prevention. We found so many people wanted to talk about treatment or the policing around drugs, but nobody really was pushing prevention. I think we need to, as a society, we need to reset that and get back to how do we stop people from getting into these positions in the first place.
I can also personally, I received an email from a school program that the health authority was providing information sessions via Zoom for parents, and so that they can have informed discussions with their teens and adolescents.
Way back when I was, you know, the drunk driving and crashes were a problem, and we used to see the Signal 66 film, you know, and I think it helped. And I just don't think that a lot of the kids that are getting introduced to drugs in school have seen what a real addict situation looks like.
So you're suggesting that
Scared straight.
Scared straight, yes.
getting into detail, SOS could get into detail about prevention programs?
Well, in the school system, once you've got the
I-
Victoria School Board.
I'll just
out of the
take that, yeah, I'll take that a little bit further. I chaired the Crystal Meth Task Force on the North Shore, and it was very successful. We had people fly out from Toronto, Vancouver, or not Vancouver, drive over, Red Deer, Edmonton to look at our program because ours was youth-led. So when I made the decision to chair it, I said, it's not going to be adult-led, we're going to listen to the youth because it's much easier to get a youth at 16 off of drugs than somebody that's been using it for 30 years. So it was very interesting because we had two girls from Colombia. Drugs are not done there that much in their communities, they said, and it's taboo, and it's because they're taught from a young age what it will do to you. So it's exactly what they said. We need to go to the Scared Straight program. And they showed pictures. They took a picture, and everybody had signed consent. And one of the young girls, Amber, that was on it, she was a heavy meth user in Victoria, and she showed her pictures when she had the no teeth, sunken, whatever, and then to when she got clean. And that was really effective. And we had those kids go and talk in the schools because it should be peer-to-peer. They don't want to hear a cop tell you don't do drugs. You know, I've always said it, the people teaching should be the peer supports or medical professions to talk about this is what it's going to do to you. And we all know as a young girl, most young girls want to look pretty. So when they see themselves losing teeth, acne, whatever, it has to hit home. So, yeah, in the States, that was one of their, Minnesota was the most successful state, and they did the Scared Straight program. But a lot of people don't like the Scared Straight, so that's your answer. It's something that the school boards have to get on board with. Any other questions? I have one. I heard a lot about the First Nations Justice Council. I actually sat on their policing review. And one of the big issues that I hear come out of that, and we've talked about at this table, is the role of restorative justice. And we know how important it is, yet there's no commitment from the province to up the funding to these programs, which are extremely successful. Is that something that SOS could do for us from our committee as well as, and it was backed up by our council? We need the province to invest in restorative justice programs, which has been proven to keep kids out of jail. So I put that to you, Jess.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, I think that it's important to realize that each one of these panels, if there was one thing that was common among all of them, it was funding. And that's why I talked earlier about raising these issues up the priority ladder, because governments have to make those decisions on where they spend the money. This is an area right now that you've just mentioned that I believe has a return on investment that would be significant. And I think there are lots of other areas as well. So the answer to the question is, can we advocate for that? Absolutely, we can.
Yeah, that'd be great, because we found here when we had our review, I don't think we've seen an increase in over 20 years And it's just not, it's not sustainable. And the municipalities, once again, are stepping up to the plate to help fund further, and we need the province to do that. And if they're serious, my other point would be, start investing in children at a young age so that they get a good feeding at school, and they get supports immediately when they need them, not 10 years later. Thank you.
Right.
So I'll give you the last word, Jess, and then we're going to have to shut her down because we've got a pretty big agenda here.
Okay, so right off the bat, I'd like to say off the top, thank you again. We really appreciate the opportunity, but we appreciate very much what you people are doing in Nanaimo and the leadership that you're providing. As I said, if there's one thing common throughout all these panels, it was the question of resources. And I think we as the public, we as a society need to readjust what our priorities are, and government will come along as they will over time to fit more with public sentiment. Public opinion means a lot when it comes to making decisions about where to spend money. Policing, we heard it over and over that they need more funding because we keep giving them more things to do than they've had to do before. And I think that's something we need to realize and deal with. Whether the Prosecutor Association told us right up front, they don't have enough prosecutors to meet the demand today. So that provides another challenge for policing. So resources, resources, resources. And it's not, we just don't want to spend more money, but somehow we have to figure out how government can spend it more efficiently and deal with these issues as a priority.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak to us. Thank you, Karen, and
Thank you.
Thanks again. And now, moving on, we'll go to the RCMP Nanaimo Detachment.
Madam
sorry.
Chair, I'm wondering if I could ask if we could move agenda item 7B ahead. We've
Yes,
got
you
some
may.
speakers from
Yeah.
Washington DC, and it's about
Yeah.
8 o'clock there. so-
Yes, okay, we will move 7B forward, please, which is community resilience, and I'll have Mr. LeBerge introduce that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. The city had the good fortune of being contacted by a company called Muflahan. It's a U.S.-based social resource agency. They've been contracted by Public Safety Canada to pilot their program called Community Resilience Early Warning Systems in 6 municipalities in Canada, 3 in Ontario, and 3 in BC. I think rather than my diving into an overview of what it's about, what I'd just like to do is introduce our guest speakers, or here from Washington, Adnan Ansari, who's the executive director for Muflahan, and Humaira Khan, who's the technical lead on this project. Thank you very much for joining this evening. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. How much time do we have? We can be very brief, or
Can you do it in probably like 5 minutes, and then we'll open it to questions, or do you need more?
no? That's fine. 5
Yeah,
minutes.
five
Humaira,
would
you
be
want to
great, 'cause we
summarize in
are-
5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes, and then if we can expand on it when people hear the,
Sure, we will do it. Humaira, please.
thank you.
You introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Humaira Khan from Muflahan. I'm actually on a train right now,
Oh.
so if you hear background noise, I apologize in advance. Okay. Alan, do you want to
Go ahead. last.
do the
You want to
introduction?
pre-
Okay. So community resilience early warning system. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have heard about social determinants of health? Or the concept, right?
Can you, we can just barely hear you.
Okay, let me try it. Is this any better?
That's better, thank you.
Okay. How many of you have heard of social determinants of health? Okay, so most of you. So in the same way as there's social determinants of health, there's also social determinants of violence. And what the community resilience early warning system does, CRUISE, is looking at the social determinants of violence. And trying to understand what has the most impact for your environment. So we are talking about primary prevention, very specifically primary prevention.
Because she should have been first. Sorry.
Hopefully that
Okay.
announcement was
I can
out there.
continue then.
Yeah, let's do that, please.
Okay, sorry, I'll take over from here, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
Because she's on a train. So yes, so as Humera was saying, that there are social determinants of violence, and what CRUISE is Community Resilience Early Warning System. The objective of the Project CRUISE, which is funded by Public Safety Canada, is to mainly two things: enhance understanding of community safety and resilience, and understand the well-being factors impacting safety and vulnerability to violence. So the way we do it actually is we look into big data. We understand how the data for nearly 75 indicators are interacting with each other. We looked at the risk and protective factors to gain insights into resilience and vulnerability of a selected location, and hopefully yours will be one of them. And this is actually a primary prevention approach for actually prevention of violence. And using data analytics and qualitative and insights, we then inform primary prevention strategies, policies, and legislation for systemic changes. Now, our methodology has been, actually, I'll pull up one slide that will help you. That
Madam Chair, the screen share is not available. It's
Okay.
not something that we do during the
That's
meetings.
fine.
Thank
That's
you.
fine. I just wanted to summarize
bad.
it. That's fine. So what we do is we use big data to understand how 75 indicators, which are divided into 7 sectors and 25 subsectors, how they interact with each other. What we were listening actually a few minutes ago in SOS, how the different factors can prevent other factors or other violence, etc. can happen. So we do it from a very quantitative perspective. We look at it from a trend analysis, we do look at correlational analysis, and then we look at using machine learning how these individual features can either be a risk factor or a protective factor of a specific location. And then understanding what is happening, then if depending on the location, we can work with the local social players also, and also with the city, and understand what has been going on in the history of the city. And based on that, we provide an analysis of different risk and protective factors, how the hate crimes, how non-violent crimes and violent crimes, they can be reduced, and also whatever might be your well-being factors, whether it's housing or drug use, or it might be homelessness or food security. Depending on what your priorities are, we can provide a lot of insight into that, so that as in the end was being talked about, that there are limited resources, but so many unlimited needs. So we can help you prioritize that based on data, and data that comes from mainly from Statistics Canada and from you. So that's in a nutshell what CRUISE is. We have been funded by Public Safety Canada, and as was introduced in the beginning, that we are working with the 3 cities in British Columbia. With Victoria, we've already completed our work. With Burnaby, we are close to completion, and there's one more. Hopefully, it will be you. And we have worked in Ontario with Hamilton, with Sudbury, and we are working with Peterborough. That's 5 minutes. Oops, then allow
Thank you.
to ask questions.
Okay, is there questions? Ruth?
So I noticed you said hopefully it would be yes. Is
Yeah,
there?
we are doing it.
Okay, so it is happening. Is there a time frame for the research and any conclusions that will be made?
So once you after this, once we get started, we will need up to 3 months, and it can be done. I mean, if that's we can discuss that with you in very specific dates.
Okay, I'm actually going to let you guys go because I have some questions that I will put to Ms. Wood and Mr. LeBears based on our previous discussions. So, and I know your time is later there, so thank you so much, and we look forward to working with you.
I look forward to working with you also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say, so when they reached out to me, I referred it obviously to myself, Ms. Wood, and Mr. LeBears, and we had a much more in-depth conversation around this. And one thing, it's free, which is great. And one thing we heard when we were doing a lot of public engagement is that a lot of our nonprofits don't have access to data. So this will do that for them. So they'll be able to come forward, and we should hopefully be able to gather that. And I'm going to ask Ms. Wood to talk about what they are looking for from the crews, if that's okay, or Mr. LeBerge, whichever one of you.
Great, thank you. Through the chair to the committee. We're definitely interested in using some of this data to actually currently support the work that the city's already doing. So I think, in past meetings, we've talked about, city plan, our integrated action plan, as well as our health and housing action plan and our downtown community safety action plan, and as well as our gun and gang work that we're doing with youth as well. And I think this data will help supplement the work that we're doing to assess and see where there might be further gaps. It's just another data source that we'll be able to use to actually have a whole picture. As we know, this is socially complex work and there's so many variables. And so the more painting of a picture we can have through different data sources allows us to kind of identify trends, especially around protective factors, because there's always going to be risk factors within a community. It's just building up those protective factors there. So I think the report, the committee will see there's a whole host of indicators that they can provide information on, which often communities or city staff don't always have time to kind of pull together. And the other thing being is that we would like to work with, our RCMP partners and some other partners in IMO SPO, as well as some other BC Housing and Island Health, to actually get some more localized data to be able to fill this in. Because right now, this is, what's available, publicly, whether it's through Census Canada or some public data that just takes time to kind of pull all together. But then there'll be some localized data that we'll like to pull into this as well.
Okay, and something else I wanted to add, we also want to look at food security through this. So that would mean, talking to Loaves and Fishes, talking to the different food programs. What is our food security here? And they'll be able to do a lot of work for us around that, which is an area that doesn't get a lot of attention, really. And so that was kind of cool to hear. This is not just about crime. It's not just about violence. It's about social issues that could lead towards antisocial behaviors or lead people down a wrong path, or just how can we support them so it doesn't get that? And that's, I found the food security thing quite interesting, because we do know, and I know when I ran the Kids for Kids program at Georgia Avenue, the number of kids that don't get fed unless they're at school. So I think this would be a good way to get more information. It's very important that we get, and I'm sure through Ms. Wood and her team, the information will get out to the nonprofits. So what information are they looking forward to as well? And I know SOS or SPO will work with us to say, we're looking for information on this way. We don't have the time. Can you get this group to look for that for us? Or if there's, different outreach workers that are looking for certain information, even VIU, like if in Scott and your programs, if you guys are hearing or seeing something, I encourage you guys to reach out directly, because it doesn't have to come through this committee, to reach out to Ms. Wood and her team, and they'll see, does it apply, or is it something that's lower down our list, whatever. So I just wanted to bring it forward because it is free. We're one of 3 people in the country that was chosen, so I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm hoping it will give us some good information to help us get more grants, help nonprofits get grants, and help us look at, and I'm sure most of us know a lot of what the social determinants are, but we always need, as everybody knows, for government, you've got to have stats, right? So with that, is there any other questions? Great, okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Dave, thanks, Chrissy. Moving forward to Inspector Rochette.
Well, good afternoon to Chair and the committee members. Well, first of all, I'd like to say the SOS presentation kind of covers a lot of topics I was going to discuss. So I sent a lot of documentation to the community members in regards of crime stats and the annual performance planning. So I see that, we only have an hour left, so I'm not going to go through everything, but I'm going to go over the detachment priorities. So the priorities are set, obviously fiscal year for the RCMP, it's April 1 to March 31st. So we're at the end of our 2024-25 and APP stands for annual performance planning priorities for the detachment. So I know that Superintendent Burton kind of did a presentation in April and went over some of the details in regards to APP. I'll go over some of the priorities and some of the successes and challenges we've had during the year. The other aspect of this is starting in March, that's when we started consultation with the City of Nanaimo, as well as the regional district and all the First Nations in regards to what should be our priorities for the next fiscal year, which is from April 1st, 2025 to March 31st, 2026. So obviously, as the RCMP, we get some of the priorities are dictated from Ottawa, and then we can massage them and manage them into with certain priorities and objectives that are more relevant to the community in question in regards of the city of Nanaimo wants the police to focus on certain aspect of crime, then we can add that to the APP. So for last year, which is going to end next month, crime reduction. So Revoy, which was mentioned during the SOS presentation, Nanaimo is the only detachment in BC that has a full-time site team, Special Investigation Target Enforcement. They work hand in hand with the downtown enforcement team as well, that you may have seen walking downtown, especially during the summer, for sure. So currently with the Revoy process, the way it works is it's not led by the RCMP, but we're part of the committee that identify possible clients, and we work with probation and corrections and different agencies. And currently the Nanaimo RCMP has 10 Revoy clients. Out of the 10, there's only one that currently we have a warrant for arrest. The other 9 clients are currently in custody, facing charges, or in community facing charges and being managed by probation. So that's where we're at in regards of Revoy. For the PTEP target, we work in relation with the gang task force, which have an office in Victoria and as well as in Green Timbers and E Division in Surrey. Those target identified locally, and we seek funding because usually it's related to bigger projects, and obviously there's a dollar value there that we don't always have. So we identify 2 or 3 PTEP targets every year, and then we seek funding, which we usually get. And in this case, we just had recently, we haven't done a press release in regards to that because it's linked to gang enforcement, and we don't want to. It's an ongoing investigation, but we had probably one of the largest drug seizure in about 5-6 weeks ago, with the large quantity of obviously drugs and cash and firearms, and we arrested 3 important targets. In regards to youth, gang awareness strategies, presentations in schools, so we've been receiving a lot of requests, especially from the high schools, in regards to presenting, and we've been quite successful with presentation. We just had last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe not related to gang awareness, but as well as we do a lot of presentation related to mental health for youth and support. And we had Corey Hirsch that did a presentation to probably 200 and 250 kids at NDSS. For people that don't know him, he's an ex-NHL player that wrote a book a few years ago, and he struggled would shorten his career, obviously, in regards to mental health issues, and he's quite open about it, so I don't have any concern about discussing this, but, suicide attempts, and so he presented to the BC Association Chief of Police in November. I was present. I was really impressed with him, as well as Andrew Burton, and so we invited him to attend NDSS, and he did a presentation in Victoria, as well as the school in Campbell River, and he came here and had huge success, really well received. We received an email from a parent that, just thanked us for the presentation. The student went home and opened up about some of the struggles that he or she was having. And, it's impressive when you get, and we received that email probably within a day or 2 after our presentation. So it was really impactful. So those are the type of things that mainly yet by a youth theme that, we try to work with all the schools. Road safety, combating impaired driving and road checks. So we've had some issues in regards to staffing for traffic, municipal traffic unit. We've had members with injuries, and obviously we don't backfill when we have a member injured. We don't have really resources to just move around. We've obviously emphasized to our general duty officers to the importance of doing some road checks, and we did some target enforcement and bring people in overtime sometimes and get any funding from the province to especially before Christmas. We did some road check enforcements and looking at impaired driving. So if you look at the numbers, this, in 2024, we had 7 fatal accidents, collisions, and in 2023, we had 5. So, and we've seen a slight decline in the number of violation tickets being served by members and enforcement, and unfortunately, it's due to, on a good side, is we just have one member from the traffic team that's just returning. She's currently on gradual return to work and expected to be back and able to work back on the streets in a month or two. So it's good news for the detachment and the community. Whoops. Next one. This one? No. Yeah, here we go. So other priorities have been identified, and they will be the same. Like employee wellness, and will be part of the next fiscal year. It's a priority that's always present. Obviously, it's important of managing and supporting our members. As well as, obviously, when I talk about members, I talk about the support staff as well. Like at the detachment, we have over 85 municipal employees that, we support as well. And so I can say that within the last year, we probably reduced by half the number of members we have on what we call ODS. So basically, it's sick leave for different type of injuries, what we call occupational stress injuries as well. So we have a pretty robust system in place. We offered some training. We had a program called Sky Resilience that we brought to the detachment with instructors from Lower Mainland. We had over 40 employees that participate in the program. So it's been really well received and supported by all employees. Regards of inclusion and reconciliation with our First Nations, policed by Nanaimo RCMP. So IPS staffing was an issue. Especially last year, and but now we're at full staff. We have all the members from IPS staffing all there. We have the 2 officers. So we've been able to re-engage with the nations and attend like several meetings, and we've received like positive feedbacks from the nations as far as like us being more present, and which is part of the inclusion process. And especially when you look at Sea Building Trust. They know if there's requirement for assistance, we're available to attend and support whatever issues that they want support. Community public safety. So we break it down into 3 different objectives for the detachment. So I know it's been mentioned multiple times here, are the Restorative Justice Program. So it's one program that we do have to report quarterly. Obviously, we were quite supportive of the request from the program manager to get increased funding from the city, which the city gracefully agreed to provide an increase. I know that we've supported grant applications from the program. Last Friday, I had a meeting with the Minister Young from Community Safety, and one of the topics that was discussed with the 2 MLAs and some senior advisors, the RJ program was discussed at length, BC Housing, housing support, as well as the MHLO program, which I'll discuss here briefly, and as well as, obviously, I received, they had a lot of questions in regards to the REVOID program and SIDE program and some of the challenges and success from the detachment. So the RJ, the Restorative Justice Program, is part of the community public safety. The MHLO, which is a mental health liaison officer position, which has been quite successful for the detachment. We currently working, and we have approval from Island Health and support from the province to get a second nurse. The person is just going through security clearance. We will need, once the second nurse is in position, we will staff a second officer to assist with some of the calls for service related to mental health. If you look at some of the stats that I have here, that when you go to mental health, just in 2024, we like the number of calls for check well-being files. We just had just over 2,800 calls for service out of 42,000 files. So it's significant. Out of those 2,800 files, we had 739 apprehension that were done by members. 739. And out of those 739, 64 were done by the what we call CAR 54. Obviously, by having one officer, that person cannot be obviously on shift 24/7. His role, because he's by himself, is to focus on clients that we get repeat calls for service, or they're really, we have a few violent clients that if we can work with an RGH and get support and get them some referrals, and it would decrease the number of calls for service as well as assist the person. Recruiting, obviously, as was mentioned in the SOS presentation, we're all, like all agencies are looking for new recruits. So I can say that our numbers are a pretty good shape. We're doing well at Depot right now. I think we've get about 10,000 applicants right now, which is about the average. If you look at a couple of years ago when we were down to like 4,000 to 5,000 applicants, we usually train approximately, on a good year, like this year, it's looking good, probably between 800 to 1,000 cadets. So they graduate from Depot. I can mention for Nanaimo, we have 2 recruits that are, one's graduating later this month, and we're getting another one at the end of March, and probably another one in April. So it's always exciting to get new recruits. I really enjoy bringing someone new. The way it works nowadays too is a lot of time, like all the recruits we're getting back, they're all from Vancouver Island. So some don't even have to move. So it's always interesting to get people that have, they're late 20s, early 30s. They've had jobs within the community. They have friends there and support in place. And the adjustment is way easier for them to, learning a new role. And at least, you have support at home and you don't have to move. And so it's been positive, and we're really excited about in regards to that. So those are the priorities that were identified for the last fiscal year. Like, what's going to happen now in mid-March is I will go around and meet city officials and as well as regional district and, like I mentioned, the nations, and look at what they would like to see from the police, what we should focus on. And so I bring this forward to the committee. Obviously, I have an influence to council, and if there's anything that you feel that the police should focus on, and obviously everything ultimately end up under community, public safety, or crime reduction. So we ultimately we get a signed agreement with all the partners. So if there's from the city of Nanaimo, there's a desire to focus on, as an example, traffic or domestic violence, or we will create that as an objective for the detachment. And this is all shared obviously with all the members. It's the priorities are advertised everywhere in the detachment. They're put on all the walls, and so members are well aware that what we need to focus on and what is expected from our community partners, and expectation as well from senior management.
Thank you. So 2 ways we can look at this. If the committee is prepared today, if you want to look and see what's been proposed from previous years, thoughts of what you'd like to see included, doesn't mean they will, but recommendations to council. Or we can put it on our next agenda, giving you time to think about it and come back at the next meeting and say, okay, we've had a chance to really dive into this. This is what we believe could be important for the city to focus on. Thoughts on that today, or do you want to wait? Doug?
Just for an example of clarification, Inspector, where it says there were 429 traffic offenses last year, or in 2024, is that tickets issued or just investigations?
It's ticket issued, and we're looking at Motor Vehicle Act offenses, right? Driving while prohibited is an example.
So that's less than 2 tickets a day?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
there was
absolutely.
some,
And I can say there was like 2,700 or so violation ticket served as well.
So there's tickets as well. These
So
are
because they're separated, right? The violation tickets they're not part of the presentation that I sent you, unfortunately. Because there's so many data that I kind of need to narrow it down to make sure that, because I could probably talk for about an hour and a half in regards of all the stats here. But if there's a demand or a need from the committee to get more data, because we're all about data. We have a crime analyst at the office that whatever is asked, if there's a requirement, I want to know how many arson you guys have, how many charges were laid, we can provide all that information within a reasonable timeline, obviously.
So just to sum up, when you're talking about your traffic offenses, you're referring to those that were not what we call violations, but actual reports to a Crown or,
Yes,
okay, thank you.
just above a violation
Okay,
ticket.
thank you.
Sorry.
Scott?
May I ask the inspector a question? Where would
course.
you like to see our priorities head if you had to give an answer for that?
I get, the point of this is kind of for the like, we work for the public, right? So, I would prefer that it would come from you guys or from, but, and the reality is I live in the community, so there's no surprise as to what the general public or the council would like to see for the police to focus on. It makes sense to all of us, obviously. But we need to keep in mind that we can't, there's 5 points here. We can't put 7, 8, 9. They could, 5 or 6 is kind of maximum, that manageable and reportable as well, right? So we have to come up in a way that it shows is it improving? Is it decreasing? Are we going the right way? Should we, make some changes? So.
Thanks.
So I'm thinking then, Ms. Bakar, if we could put this on for the next agenda, and if you guys want to come forward with some of your thoughts as what you hear from your fellow friends, co-workers, whatever, what are the issues that you see in the community, and bring it forward at the next meeting, I think that would be important. And we can have some discussion and put that forward as recommendation to council as to what the committee sees as priorities. Ruth?
I just had a question because our next meeting is in April.
Yeah.
And so that's not too late then for the.
Mr. Bichette?
No, if it's I think it's early April, if I'm not mistaken. That's fine.
Ms. Bakar?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's on April 9th.
No,
That's
that
fine,
worked
yeah.
perfectly. Usually, there's an expectation that it should by the end of April, it should be in place.
So is that all right with everybody then? I nods, see nods, yeah. I just think it's important that we get your perspective because you're out in the community and, I mean, for me, if it went by emails, it would be right now on snowplows and traffic, obviously. Okay, thank you very much, Inspector Rochette, and feel free to leave if you've got appointments. Chief Doyle,
All right.
keeping you all to 15 minutes.
Pardon me?
Keeping you to 15
Oh.
minutes total.
Hopefully, we're done much before 15 minutes.
I'm watching.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So just going to quickly go over our priorities, a statistical overview, and then our key objectives throughout the year. This is trying to capture the big categories and mainly the important categories. In the middle, from 2021, you'll see a break in the middle of the year where we transition between technology platforms, so that's why we have the break. We just didn't want to merge them, we kept them separate. So this is, again, you're only seeing a small portion. We actually break our calls down into over 100 different types of calls, so we're just capturing some of the bigger ones in there. Also, before I get underway, I'd also like to point out, although we're called the fire department, we're kind of, as you can see, an all hazards responder. We respond to, if there's an emergency, we respond. And our incident priorities fall under about 6 broad categories, including emergency response, fire prevention and investigations, training, public education, mental health and wellness, and emergency program management. My colleague, Evan Lloyd, just over here.
Chief Doyle, people want to know what MESA is.
Oh, my apologies. It's a medical incident. So, yes, is that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, these are, yes. there we
We're
go.
famous for our acronyms.
Yes, we're very famous.
But I wasn't sure if I was right, so.
Just on a little bit of an interesting note across the chart, a couple of the more changes, more significant changes would be in 2020 to 2021, we saw an uptick in structure fires. In 21 to 22, We saw medical alarm responses, fire other, which includes non-structure fire and motor vehicles. So a structure fire is your house fire. So if it's involved in the structure of the building, it is a structure fire. So we try to catch it before it becomes a big structure fire and you have to move out of your home or have to rebuild your home, but that's essentially what a structure fire is. So we saw an increase in fire other, that would be your bark mulch fires, your nuisance fires. We've talked about those at this committee as well. So, and motor vehicle accidents, we saw increase in 21 to 22. We also, from 22 to 23, we saw an increase again in medical incidents again and alarm incidents. So those are generally alarm systems in businesses or homes that are triggered by a fire, smoke, or something else. A lot of times technology failing. I know the RCMP has the same issue with alarm systems on burglar alarms. So historically, our data, I don't have it here in front of you, but from about 11 years ago, 2013 till now, we've gone from, actually this year, I don't have the totals up, I'll show you in a sec here, but we've gone from approximately 7,000 to 12,000 calls, which is about just over 5% increase annually, and a 67-ish% increase overall from 2013. As communities grow, fire incident or emergency incidents grow. That is really the nature of emergency incidents. As your populations grow and the roads get more congested and we higher density, we grow upwards and outwards. It just emergency incidents correspondingly grow. On a good note, so we were I felt like we were on a little bit of an unsustainable trajectory in incident growth. Although it was about just over 5% a year, we did see some big jumps in 22, 23, and 24. Actually, sorry, 22 and 23. 24, thankfully, we saw a slight decline. So in medical, of course, we call MESA. I apologize again for that. The medical incidents, we saw a decrease of 6%. Alarms, we saw an increase, marginal though. Fire others, we saw a decrease. So that's, again, our nuisance fires, bark mulch fires, wildfires, that kind of, so yeah, wildfires are definitely a big category, but burning complaints, decrease, motor vehicle accidents, decrease, structure fires, a slight increase. Hazardous materials calls, so that's if we have gas spills, we have a truck going, a commercial truck going through a community that spills some type of product, anything like that, we saw a decrease, and then vehicle fires. So overall, I'm encouraged by the data going downwards in 2024. And then this is our benchmarks. This is informed by National Fire Protection Association 1710, which informs career firefighters and volunteer fire department staffing levels, as well as response metrics. So in this, we try to respond so when someone calls an emergency, we try to be there within 6 minutes. That includes taking the call, processing the call, getting into our gear. If we have to put on firefighter gear, it's 20 seconds longer because it takes a while to get the firefighting gear on. But otherwise, we try to get there in 6 minutes to your emergency. On big incidents, like fires, hazmat calls, technical rescue calls, whether that's we do high angle tower crane, confined space rescue. It requires more resources. To get those resources on scene, that's a 10-minute response. That's the benchmark we've adopted. And we endeavor to do that to the 90th percentile. So we want to meet that benchmark. I will say that the NFPA standard, both in resourcing and response metrics, is aspirational. It's something that communities are advised to work towards, but realistically, to meet these benchmarks, it would mean even more and more resources, which isn't just not realistic. So,
Get that route.
Pardon me, Councillor?
Nothing.
Yeah. But they are aspirational, and I think importantly on our for our full response, we meet those benchmarks at a very high level. So if you look in the middle of the chart, arrival of a full alarm assignment, all the resources we need to do our work, we're up above the 90th percentile. So we're very proud of that. Overdose incidents, another area that I'm encouraged by from 23 to 24. In 2022, we saw an enormous jump from 688 to 1,822 in 2023 for an increase of 164.83%. We saw a decrease from 1822 to 1150 in 2024 for a decrease in nearly 37%. So I know the next question is going to be why. Our data is pretty rudimentary. We get to the call. Sometimes the people we don't even talk to because they'll remain unconscious the whole time, or we'll revive them. So the data on our end is we respond to a call, and that is the extent of the data we have, and that it's an overdose incident. The rest of the data is in the healthcare system, so we don't know patient outcomes, and we don't know what happened to the patient when they go in. So we go to the incident, we help them, stabilize them in pre-hospital care, and then they arrive at the hospital, and then that data is in another place. But I anecdotally have heard reports, I think most people have, in terms of seeing similar decreases in 2024. So, but our fire department data is just that. We go to a call, it's an overdose, and stabilize and kind of move on to the next call. So in terms of data, if anyone has any questions, otherwise let's keep on moving on here. So our master plan. So we had a 3-phase master plan. The reason why we had a consultant develop a master plan firstly was because it hadn't been done externally for a number of years. So it provided an environmental scan of our organization, see how we compared to peer departments, how it measured against like the overarching framework of regulations and best practices that we're supposed to adhere to. In that plan, they talked about a 3-phase plan. Interestingly, we've adopted phases 1 and 2 already. In fact, phase 1 was adopted in 2023. Phase 2 is actually being implemented as we speak in 2025. And each phase, we hired 20 firefighters in 23 and 20 firefighters right now for a net result of having each 20 firefighters operates a fire truck 24/7. So when you think of an emergency response organization or any organization that responds 24 hours a day, you'd think 4 people on a fire truck, you'd need to hire 4. There's 4 shifts to run a fire truck all the time. So 4
Just on that, there's lots of, in my opinion, false information out in the community that this was done because of overdoses, which is not accurate at all. Could you just expand on why we needed those 40, please?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Medical incidents definitely contribute to our overall resourcing plan. However, there's a lot more that goes into resourcing. First off, National Fire Protection Agency 1710. It's a response standard and a staffing standard. On low hazard, so small buildings, that requires 16, 17 people. The medium-sized hazard, strip malls, 3-story, 4-story walk-ups would require 28 firefighters for a big incident, and for a high-rise, 43. And when we look around our community, you see with density and us growing upwards in high density, those incidents, if we have them, are extremely resource intensive. That's why the standards developed. It also talks about response times. It's also the ability to respond to large scale emergencies. So as you've seen in the interior, in California right now, with wildfires, that they require an enormous amount of resourcing to respond to them. That you can get overwhelmed very quickly. So it's for large-scale incidents, not just wildfires, any large-scale incident. The Gene Burns building fire. We just had a fire out at Harmac that took the better part of multiple weeks to put out. We were on scene with all of our mutual aid partners, Lanceville Cedar, East Wellington. There was Lanceville Cedar, East Wellington, Cranberry, and Extension, ourselves, the Harmac firefighters, for days upon days upon days. And concurrent incidents, when If Councillor Armstrong calls in a structure fire, our full alarm would go to that. In the past, we would be completely tapped out on resources. So if my colleague Dave LaBerge, he called in an emergency, we wouldn't have resources to respond to his emergency if they happen concurrently. So large scale development, concurrent incidents, and medical calls, they don't take very long to respond to. Generally, like our time on scene isn't very long, but they do take up a resource, so which impacts concurrent incidents. So
I just think it was important that people realize that this is not because of addictions that we had to hire more, that even if without the medical, we still would have been, I believe, required to hire those because of our response for fire, et cetera. And the medical response, that's a discussion we can have at a later date, but thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Councillor Armstrong. And then phase 3, at some point in the future, calls for another fire station to be staffed. The area in question right now, where the consultants recommended to get the best use of our resources, is in the town site and boundary area. So we're not there yet. That's a forward-looking phase, but we have implemented phase 1 and 2. And actually, phase 2 will be operational on February 24th. So we're just finishing that up right now. Yeah, so that's phase 1, 2, and then 3. So just in terms of initiatives, in terms of being an all hazards responder, you can see in operations and prevention, incident response right now, this last year we responded to nearly 12,000 incidents. There's certain regulations that require us to train to that. If we respond to it, we have to train to it. So we train all our members in all the practices we respond to: technical rescue, high angle, ice rescue, driving, you name it, firefighting. There's also, we're also required to do
Hazmat?
hazardous materials. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a, yes, yeah, we do have hazardous materials too. Basically any emergency. In terms of inspections and investigations, we are required to investigate fires and inspect businesses. We have over 3,000 businesses in the community that we have to inspect. We don't have to do all 3,000 in 1 year. There are some that are on a little bit longer basis. So, but over 2,000 need to be done annually. And we have a full fire prevention division of 6 people that are out there doing inspections in the high acuity properties. So where there's the highest risk, and then our lower acuity properties, we have our firefighters inspecting those when they have time to do that. Likewise, we have to pre-plan the buildings that we're responding to. We're just rolling out a new program as we speak. It's just basically an iPad where when the firefighters go, they can have all the information about the building, pictures, systems in front of them on their iPad, live when they respond. Fleet management, we have an enormous amount of fleet to do this. We have over 10 fire trucks. We have, on the 24th, we'll have 6 frontline here in Nanaimo, another one frontline on Protection Island, and then we need apparatus to back those up, and we need apparatus to call in when we have an even larger emergency for crews to come in. So if we're wondering why we have extra fire trucks, it's not because we want to, it's because it's we don't typically get all the way down, but we do get right down to having no spare fire trucks. And a really kind of a cool direction is that by 2028, they will all have anti-idling green technology on them. So they're not electric. Those electric trucks are very expensive, but they do have tech that saves a lot of fuel by turning themselves off when they don't need to be actually driven without us doing it. And enhanced medical scope of practice. So seeing that we do respond to medical emergencies, we want to have the best level of training. So we are doing EMR, and where the province is enhancing some of the scope of practices that we can do on scene. So that's our operations and prevention. Outreach and education. We also educate, and we do preventative programs in the community beyond just inspecting the buildings, including Smoke Alarm Saves Lives campaign. We'll usually choose a community, go out in that part of the community. We've done Protection Island, we've done mobile homes, we've done town site area, and then we install smoke alarms. We go door to door, knock, and install smoke alarms. We also do bystander CPR. As when people have a heart attack, the opportunity for them to have a good recovery diminish every minute. So we teach, we have a program in the high schools where we go in and teach high school students how to do bystander CPR. We also, I think we're one of the only fire departments that distribute naloxone on scene, or if people come to the hall and need it. We also do educational open houses with a whole bevy of educational opportunities at the open house. And we do that annually. In terms of wildfire, I thought everyone would be interested in this. We've really ramped up. Coincidentally, we've hired we'd like to call him our wildfire expert. And it's coincidentally, as the wildfire risk has been ramping up over this number of years. So we have a number of Fire Smart neighborhood programs where we go in, advise them how to clean it up, bring in a chipper, get rid of debris, and try to make that safer. Long Lake, Protection Island, Wildfire Structural Protection Unit, we got a grant from the province to build a trailer. And again, it's timely because of California, where you install sprinkler heads on the on our soffits to create a kind of a micro environment to pre-wet fuels, and also create a high humidity area to try to prevent wildfires from impacting as they approach. We're also doing a lot of additional wildfire training in terms of we go to the Wildland Urban Interface exercise every year, including in Penticton this year. We just did response to interface through our International Association of Firefighters group. We're doing an engine boss course through BC Wildfire, and we just built a new wildfire. Not new to us, it's a replacement unit, but to replace an old wildfire 4x4 unit to get into the hard to reach areas like Lindley Valley and just this hard to reach areas. And community outreach, we're always doing community outreach and trying to provide seasonal hazard information. In terms of NFRT initiatives for emergency management, we have a colleague, Mr. Lloyd, there. He's been doing an enormous amount of work at business continuity, emergency planning for the community. He's got a grant for a hazard risk vulnerability assessment. It's actually that's a climate risk vulnerability assessment. He corrected me on our way down here. So we're not looking at all the hazards in our community, but really focused on the climate risk. We know we've done a hazard risk vulnerability assessment. We also do emergency support services. We've had, we have a number of structure fires every week, every month, every year. And when people are displaced and they don't have somewhere to go, Mr. Lloyd and our ESS coordinator contractor go to the scene and they arrange for temporary overnight shelter through the province for people who are displaced. And then updating our emergency response and recovery plans and business continuity if we have an emergency, so the city can continue to provide services. Lastly, some really broad overarching categories, which are going to impact us all, is next generation 911. We are moving away, and this is Canada, North America, is moving away from analog 911 services. It's a federal initiative. We will be going more to a digital environment where when we call 911, we can text, send video, a whole bunch of other features. Also that the call isn't, it's more accurate. The call goes to this coordinate, lat long, versus more rudimentary GIS data. And it's supposed to be more resilient in emergencies. So that all important. And we, as the fire department, are shepherding that in for just being ready for that for our community. Regional mutual aid, we will never have enough resources to do everything. But one of the ways that we make up for resourcing is to form partnerships. And we have partnerships with all our regional fire departments. So that's Extension, Cranberry, Lanцeville, East Wellington, Cedar. I don't think I'm missing anyone. Yeah, we don't actually have a mutual aid agreement with them. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so our neighboring communities. And we do rely on each other when we're really taxed for resourcing. And we just, after a long period of time, have got a new mutual aid agreement that's circulating right now, and we'll be done. So we're pretty proud of that. And lastly, something that's very unique to Nanaimo Fire Rescue, we're the only fire department in the world that runs a fire academy. We work with over 150 departments. We have approximately in the double digits of core programs that we run, and for our department and other departments. And the revenue that we generate off these programs comes back to our community and offsets the cost for everything, including the fire department. So we're really proud of that, and it's a program that we're running. We run a lot of training through that program for other departments that funds our training in our fire department. So,
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the chief? Well, seeing none, we're moving on now to Mr. LeBairs for Public Safety Department overview.
Madam Chair, I'm just looking at our time. It's 20 minutes
Go to Ms.
left.
Wood.
And I know it's important for the committee to have some time to have some discussion, and I don't want to deprive them of that. And I'd also like Ms. Wood to have an opportunity to give an update on the hub. So could I
Yes,
suggest
Ms. Wood?
maybe that I
Yep,
come back next
that
month?
works for me. Ms. Vicar, if you could add that to the next one. Thank you. Sneaky, yeah. Ms. Wood?
Thank you, Mr. LaBerge. I'm only going to take a few minutes and just open the floor for questions. But I just want to, through the chair to the committee, give you an update on the current operations of the drop-in hub. What's been happening for folks that have been accessing the site, as well as some of the challenges that we've been dealing with around the site as well. And just a reminder to the community members that the drop-in hub is unique in the sense that it's receiving multi-level government funding, supporting unsheltered individuals by providing kind of their basic needs services. And that was kind of feedback we got from people with lived experience, that they wanted to have access to a place where they could get meals, clothing, hygiene services, washrooms, warming, cooling services, as well as access to emergency shelter beds as well. And I think the unique thing about the hub, just as a reminder to folks here as well, you may have heard me talk about the Heart and Hearth program. So Nanaimo was identified as a priority community to get Heart and Hearth through BC Housing. And in order to get into the Hearth program, you do have to be stabilized in shelter. And so adding the additional shelter beds at the hub overnight actually opens up more access to the Hearth units, allowing more people to go inside, because we only have 63 permanent year-round shelter beds, and we have 238 Hearth units. So there's a bit of a chokehold, so we do need to work on expanding that access as well. Daytime services through the drop-in hub, I think the committee will remember, are offered between 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it is currently, the daytime services are being funded by the city as well as the federal government through the Reaching Home program. And daytime services are being offered by Island Crisis Care Society. And an additional 20 overnight shelter beds are being provided at the hub as well, being funded by BC Housing and being operated by Nanaimo Family Life Association as well. So I just asked for some updates. I just want to let the committee know that as part of the requirement through the drop-in hub, there are quarterly formal assessments that will be reported to the funders, so to BC Housing as well as the city, and as well as through United Way to the federal government as well. And so our next formal report will be, is due actually March 31st. So happy to bring back any kind of formal reports back to the committee. But just as services started on January 2nd, what we're seeing right now is on average, they're getting over 98 visits per day. And of these visits, an average 89 unique visitors are visiting the hub daily. And that number actually goes up as folks will recognize that this week and last week, we've actually had extreme weather stuff. So yeah, people aren't staying there all day long. They're going there to warm up, get connected to services, and then other people are rotating through. So those are the numbers there. And then as well as the overnight shelters, they've been basically operating at 90% capacity on average. Most nights they're full. The reason why that's a little bit skewed is because during the week of social assistance distribution, folks do have other shelter options because they do have financial options that week. And so a lot of them you'll see through shelter trends tend to have lower occupancy during that time as well. The other thing I think that's really unique about this site is that we are seeing people who don't normally access service for whatever reason. It could be that they're unwilling or they're just unable to access. They are accessing supports at the drop-in hub. And many of these individuals that don't normally access overnight services are also accessing services in the overnight shelter as well. So some of the challenge that we've been kind of being currently addressed at the drop-in hub is, we've talked about it through the SOS and, resources. And so what we've noticed is we have had an increase in congregation on the Nichols Street side, especially in the morning when the shelter closes at 8 a.m. and then the daytime services don't start till 11 a.m. And that just really is kind of a gap in, the funding resources that are available. Just talking to outreach staff, our community safety officers, they're reporting to us that it's really hard to get people moving in the morning, which we could probably understand is hard for us sheltered people as well. And there's actually a lack of services that are offered between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. So it's really hard to get folks moving, and there's also nowhere really for them to go. And so Island Crisis Care Society's just given notification to the union to realign their daytime hours. So they're going to be moving from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. To better align in the morning. There still will be a gap between 4 p.m. and 7:30, but there are at least some other services that people will be accessing. So the overdose prevention site is open at that time. We have Stone Soup that will, does meal provision in the evening. AVI is open at that time. So there's some other services that folks can go and start to access as well. And then we've also just been working closely with our community safety officer team and our clean team to really support that site, especially along the sidewalk on Nichols Street. And we are coordinating with Island Health and stuff to get more proactive supports at that site. And they have been going there to provide supports and services as well. I think that's just a brief update that I wanted to provide you. Happy to answer questions as far as what next steps will be, but happy to bring that formal report back once it's provided by the service providers.
Thank you. Doug?
Christy, thank you. Is there any sense that the drop-in center reduces the load perhaps on people going up to the emergency? And does it offer sort of basic first aid or bandages or pills?
Through the chair, I wouldn't be able to answer the usage of emergency services. I think I think the last time we've talked about our homeless point in time count and the number of people that are facing homelessness is such a big gap. We probably could use a few drop-in centers to be able to kind of reduce that load. However, many people are getting access to wound care. They're getting access to CORE and other services through the drop-in hub, either by having staff calling them to come on site and or working with the CORE team to show up proactively to provide those supports and services, as well as our CSOs are also connecting people to health services should they need it.
So I'll ask my questions. I don't see any. Interestingly enough, I think we've only had one complaint about it, so that's always a good sign that there's only one. So has there been an increased need for police or the CSOs since they've gone inside?
I think the CSOs have been working hard to troubleshoot stuff with the service providers. I have received limited, inquiries from the neighborhood. I've had, just questions from the neighborhood and residents and been able to answer those. But I think generally people are noticing a little bit more of a reduction, at least during the day at some points on Victoria, with people being able to access Nichols Street. But I haven't heard any other issues at that far. I'll let RCMP speak to any issues that might have at the drop-in hub.
Probably doesn't have the stats with them.
No, I don't have the stats with me, but I know that conversation with our bike units, they do try to attend, but I think a lot is managed by the CSOs, and if they require any further assistance, they call us. But it is part of the bike unit kind of daily routine to go by and see what can be done.
Thank you. Any, Jennifer?
Just real quick, how long has the drop-in center been operational for?
Through the chair, the daytime operation started on January 2nd, and then the overnight services started on January 6th.
This year?
Yes.
Yeah. Seeing no other questions? Where am I here? All right. Is there any other business that somebody wants to bring forward? Kevin?
Just something interesting. I heard a CBC article talking, I don't know if anybody caught this or if this was discussed in the last meeting. I'm sorry I was absent, but I couldn't make it. There was an interesting thing in Houston that Winnipeg is trying in terms of homelessness, just in terms of the whole approach to housing. And I was just curious if any of that had come up, because it's just kind of it's all kind of the same thing, but it's a very housing first priority. Instead of focusing on shelters and short-term stuff, it's kind of swinging big and going for, no, we're just gonna, let's take all these resources and just dump them into convincing landlords to open space and like actually find permanent solutions and try to skip the middleman, so to speak.
Yeah, I looked at that Houston model, I think it was 2 years ago, I sent it out to our mayor and council and stuff, because it talked about exactly what was mentioned at that conference in Vancouver, that they're actually putting people, one person might go to one apartment building, that's it. Another will go to a different one, so they're not congregating them all in one spot. It's a really good model, but they have a lot more money. A lot of it comes in from their oil and gas revenues, et cetera, right? Whereas ours is all reliant upon provincial, federal, or municipal, right? There's no, we don't have the pile of money that Houston does, but it's a really good model to look at, I think.
I just figured, neither does Winnipeg, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. They have
No,
lots
well,
of problems and,
yeah, but a lot
other
of
than
them-
the Jets, they have nothing, so.
Yeah, no, they still have natural gas revenues, I hate to tell you, but we don't have those, but yeah. But it is a really good model that I think the province needs to look at, yeah. Hillary?
Well, I think the Hearth model is doing that with, it's temporary supportive housing, but it is still that housing first model. And I see our council sort of saying yes to every opportunity brought forward by BC Housing, which is all sort of taking that housing first approach. Whether the wraparound services that are required to make it fully successful exist in all those places and are comprehensive enough that, leaves a little bit to be desired, but the housing first approach has definitely been something that council's been committed to, so thank you for that.
Kim?
I was just going to say, further to having like one individual or fewer individuals housed in the same way. My sister has been substance use affected for almost her entire adult life, and she got into a supportive housing in Richmond called Stories, and it was a consortium of nonprofits, the Island Health, or not Island Health, but
Private.
the Health Authority. Anyway, she's been there for 8 years, and they have different floors, like they're relegated to different floors, and so your tag will allow you to go onto your floor, and they have supports and such there. And she's been able to make friends with people who are not substance use affected, which has opened up her world for sure. She's had some volunteer opportunities that have come up and such. She's 70 years old now. She's gonna be 71 this year. And that model, in my mind, is, again, you have to have something. But that model, I'd like to see our city move toward that model as well. I think one might be hard to just put individual one here and there, but to have something like that. But if, somebody I could get information on Stories and bring it to the next meeting, whatever, or someone could, it really, in my mind, because my sister's had lived experience with it, I think it works really well.
Yeah, I think what you say is very accurate. I think it's really good, and that's something that we do push back at BC Housing sometimes, that we need units for those that want to stay in recovery, those that want to go to recovery. It's very hard to recover when you're around 50 other users, and the same dealers are coming, the same crowd is coming. And it's, there's pushback on that, right? Because they just want to get people housed. But to me, warehousing doesn't solve the problem. And I think we do a lot more, that's just my personal viewpoint,
So yeah, the floors
Yeah,
are
yeah.
maybe single moms, might be seniors, kind of down.
Yeah, I think we need to really look, maybe it's something we can look at a later date, to maybe do a thing on different housing models, but I'll put that on the back burner for now till myself, Hillary, and Ms. Vicar have a chance to talk about where we're going. And because I think like we heard today from the SOS group, from yourself, the current model doesn't seem to be working well for a lot of people, so.
It's something.
Yeah, but yeah. It's bigger than us, right? We got to get the government on board, because that's who's got to fund it, because we certainly as a city can't fund stuff. We don't have, people are upset at an 8% tax increase already. Could you imagine having to do that? So, But really good points, and I think that we'll discuss looking at bringing maybe possibly housing models forward at a later date. I'll sit down with Hillary well, for those that don't know, I should tell you this too, sorry. Mr. Harding, who was our staff major liaison, has put in his retirement papers. So after, I don't know how many, close to 40 years, I think, 33 years with the city, we'll be getting a new Parks and Recs director. So yeah, it's really exciting for him, sad for us, because he's done a lot in the community and knows a lot. And I don't know who our staff liaison person will be. Obviously, our group that's always here, but he was our main contact to go over agenda items and stuff. So we want to thank him, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to do that at a later date. So, and I want to thank the committee for your patience today. I know it went longer than we did on some items. It didn't get to all, but I really want to look forward to your input for what you see as priorities for the city. And then we can refer them to council around the policing initiatives, right? We can't get into the housing right yet, but this will be around what you see as policing initiatives. It could go so far as that you want to see an increase in the mental health liaison, right? I mean, which is not really in our control, but it's still an important thing to hear if that's what is important to you. You know, for me, obviously, restorative justice is huge. It just keeps so many kids out of the big system, so. All right, seeing no other, unless there's any other questions? Oh, question period. Any questions in the audience, and it must be related to the agenda.
One quick question and one remark, if I will, Chair.
No remarks, only questions. We're very limited.
Chief, just want to know, what's the difference between it's a burning complaint or or what's the fire under? What's the difference in the statistics when they come out on the fire incident reports?
Why don't I touch base with you, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll let the chief talk to you offline.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that, chief. That's good, chief. Appreciate that. Seeing no other questions, could I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Kim, seconded by Scott. All those in favor? Thank you all. Appreciate your time and the conversation.